Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Captain CA here, and today's lesson on FlatsClass University is actually the answer to a question that I get all the time. That question is, I noticed that you're not using a loop knot on your lure. I get this all the time. My typical answer to that question is, yes, I do use a loop knot, but I don't use it for every scenario. There are certain scenarios I think a loop knot is perfect for in inshore fishing, and there are a lot of scenarios where it's not. Now, many of you have been told over time that that's the only connection knot you need to a jig or a lure, but that's not exactly true. Why don't you go to the water with me and longtime friend Richard Brokoff for a speckled trout outing, and I want you to pay particular attention to the connection on the Z-Man Prawn Stars. While you're doing that, I'm going to go down to the classroom and get everything set up so that you can learn something today. Yeah, that's a good one. You keep that one underwater. Yeah, that's a nice one. That one is a... We'll Bill dance that one. Oh, he is popping. Popping. This one might rival the last big one. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, the Prawn Star. Gotta love the Prawn Star. Nice.
That one lit up.
Oh, yeah. That is a great looking color.
That's super.
First cast with it. Head to me a little bit. This way. I just want to get that. Nice. Good shot. Really nice catch. All right, I'll get him behind the ears. Got him. What a fish. I'm gonna get one more shot like this. Wow, that was a stud.
Yeah, he's a nice one.
We were just talking about getting a good fish on number 9, and you did. I know people think we're out of our mind for letting a fish like that go. Believe it or not, Richard Brokoff is 81 years old. I mean, he's just an amazing individual. Fishes twice as hard as guys half his age. But let's talk about why we connected the Prawn Stars with this type of knot, which is an improved clinch knot versus a loop knot. Well, the main reason was the scenario that we were fishing was a creek mouth. It was outgoing tide, it was right after the start of the drop, and it starts rolling out, and it was good through about the middle of the tide. It was amazing, actually. We caught dozens of trout. But when you throw that Prawn Star up tide and it's swimming down with the tide, and you're kind of keeping it on a semi-slack line because you want that natural fall, okay? But you want to have feel. That's the number one reason for using that improved clinch knot instead of loop knot is feel. You don't have as much feel, which means it's harder to detect the bite, so you're missing strikes. And 2, there's a certain amount of mortality that happens to the speckled trout. Now, we're a catch and release boat, so we release all these fish. But if I were using, let's just say, a loop knot where I don't have as much feel, you know, it's a hinging knot, we would have likely not caught as many, and then we would have caught a lot more of them deeper in the throat, which would allow them to just die. So that is why, in that scenario, we were actually using that on that outgoing tide. Now you're probably saying, well, this video is about When would I use a loop knot in shore fishing? And let me show you a couple of scenarios where you would use it. Before I give you those 5 scenarios, let's talk about, you've always been told that a loop knot basically is the only connection knot you need for a lure in inshore fishing. And that's more or less because those were in books and instructional magazines, and they've been on television shows, and you've gone to free seminars where professional captains use it quite a bit. But a lot of that has changed over the years. I would say it is not true at all. Most of my fishing is done direct connect, and a lot of that has to do with the feel, the detectability of bites, and how I fish a bait. Because a lot of these baits have so much action now, you don't need a loop knot. You really don't need a loop knot. And some of the baits have built-in actions. But here are a few times where I do use a loop knot. Number 1 would be topwater. I only use a loop knot on topwater because you need that hinging effect to get those walk to dog motions. You're trying to get that bait to swim side to side. Anytime you have a side to side action type lure, you are going to want to use a loop knot. Another one where I'd want a loop knot would be a soft plastic jerk shad, like a 5 or a 4-inch jerk shad, where again, I'm trying to get that sub-walk feel to it. But I'm doing that if I'm working it like up high in the water column or mid column. That's when I'm using that loop knot, where I want it to walk above the fish. That's where I use it. You get down to this time of year, and loop knots are really popular if you're going to throw like surface twitch baits like this 7M Mirrolure, or possibly surface twitch baits, not subsurface, but surface. Or if I'm going to throw a wake bait, which has become very popular when fish are short striking topwater. The other time I would use it is if I'm vertically jigging. So if I'm in a deeper pass or inlet or creek where we're kind of bouncing off the bottom and you're having this up and down effect, that's another time where you need to hinge. Instead of it going this way, it's going up and down. Now, arguably, most fish, bait fish, don't swim up and down like this. But if you're trying to get a reaction strike from speckled trout that are in a hole or something like that, that would be a good opportunity. And naturally, the 5th one would be a lot of natural bait presentations with white bait or shrimp or something like that, where you need them to be able to swim around on their own and you don't want to restrict it. So those would be the 5 times where a hinging knot, well, would be pretty handy. Now, of course, I want to share with you some of the weaknesses. Overall, I will tell you, between these 2 knots, and I connected them together, if you were to pull on them, this knot would pull free and this one wouldn't. It's a weaker knot. A loop knot overall is a weaker knot, especially when it comes to slippage, or let me show you a little, you can see this little pivot point here. Well, that will wear over time. As your jigs get a little bit older, and you might notice a little burr or a little rust in there, when you elongate that knot, totally elongate it, there's going to be a pivot point where it's always swinging. And it's more prevalent with lighter tests, whether it be mono or fluorocarbon, where it's going to have a greater wear point. So it's definitely going to have that pivot point weakness, and it's going to have that slippage issue. And it's overall, if you were to put it on a knot tester, it's not as strong as an improved clinch knot, or Palomar for that fact. I'd say number 2 is feel. There is so much more feel when you're directly connected to your lure, way more feel. So especially if you're fishing toward the bottom where you need to feel bottom. Lots of times I have these on jig heads that are tungsten jig heads and whatnot, and I have so much feel that transfers through that denser fluorocarbon line back through the braid, back to the rod tip, and if I have an angle, I feel it. With lead heads on these types of, if you've got a lead jig or anything like that, and then you've got a monofilament leader with a loop knot in it, you don't have nearly the feel. It is dampened so much, especially if your connection knot up top to the braid is maybe a double uni or something like that. That FG knot really does transfer feel much better than some of the other knots. So consider detectability is pretty darn important. The other weakness to this loop knot is fishing it in heavier cover. Let's just say you've seen me fish out in Louisiana. I'm fishing in that hydrilla. I'm fishing in that taller grass, that eel grass. Here on the Nature Coast, I fish a lot of that pepper grass. Well, this knot catches on a lot of stuff because it's just a bigger, bulkier knot. It has more edges and it can get roughed up easier. It gets weakened faster, especially right here where you don't want it weak, where it's all connected in that little stretch there. With a regular clinch knot, you don't have that problem. Yeah, they can weaken the actual main leader if it gets deep enough, but most of the time, you don't have that problem at all. So anytime I'm in heavy cover or I want to skip lures or something like that, I get a much better skip if I'm throwing a solid improved clinch knot where I don't get that hinging effect there. All of a sudden it stops my lure and it tumbles and it falls short of where I want it to land. So that's another reason. Now reason 4 is this. Big, hard running trophy fish, I'm talking big jack crevalle, bull redfish, giant snook. Many times those fish are so powerful that they'll pull through this knot much faster than they could ever do any damage to this. They may wear through the leader on either one of these, that's true, but they have a better chance of popping off on this one than they do on this one. This one, I'm gonna get a much cleaner, harder hook set. This one, who knows? You know, I don't trust it on big fish. Anytime I'm fishing for big snook or I see a school offshore of huge jack crevalle, or we run across in Louisiana some outside places where the pelicans are diving and we see a massive school of bull redfish and they're all in that 35 to 40 plus inch class, I'm tying on a clinch knot. That's what I do for a client right then. I tie a clinch knot. Now I'm going to give you reason number 5, and a lot of you may go, huh? Are you serious? It's true. Sometimes you can have a lure with too much action, where it's just like a butterfly flying in the water. You'll see these videos of guys working a bait in a pool. It might be a Mirrolure or it might be a soft plastic. And they're like, look at all the action I get out of this bait. Well, that hyper action, because you've got that hinging knot everywhere, well, that blows fish out. In many cases, if you're fishing clear water or highly pressured angler water, if you live in Tampa Bay, Charlotte Harbor, if you're fishing someplace where any zone where you have lots of anglers, that loop knot, if you're not careful, your rod actions and how fast you're reeling, it can create more action that is not needed. So think about that for a second, because that is a big drawback with a loop knot sometimes. Now, like I said, there are times when you need a loop knot. I'm just wanting you to think outside the box. There's a lot of times you don't. When you're throwing a paddle tail, that paddle tail has its own action. That tail's just swimming. It has so much action and it has enough body roll if you're using the right leader and what system and everything. You don't really need a loop knot. And actually, because it's under tension, just assume this was a paddle tail, because it's under tension and under strain, it's not like it has that much. It doesn't swing the whole leader around. It just rolls the body. Well, if you have it direct connected, I guarantee you there's hardly any difference at all in the action of your baits. I would use it on a straight tail bait where I'm trying to get that side to side action like I said earlier. But in many cases, you guys are tying these loop knots for everything and it's costing you. That's all I'm saying. Now, I've been doing this for 30 years, making a living in inshore fishing, whether as a professional fishing guide, professional tournament angler, television host, seminar speaker, and I actually run a fishing school called FlatsClass University. It's an online subscription business where we teach you, the intermediate to advanced inshore angler, a lot of these types of techniques, well, to elevate your game. So just trust me when I tell you, I've seen a lot of things over the years, how the technology changes, how the fish behavior changes, how the environment changes, and I just want to pass all of that knowledge and information on to you guys. I know that some of you will probably have some of your own experiences or your own thoughts on this subject matter, and I encourage you to put it in the comments below. I'm not that guy that knows everything. I would love to hear your perspective. And I would love for you to give us a thumbs up, because by giving us that like, what you do is you help other inshore anglers find this message. And that way our sport grows. We all learn a little bit and we all catch more fish in the very end. Thanks again for your valuable time today. And I'll see you right back here in my classroom tomorrow.